I watched 43 girls get adopted before I turned 18, but the woman who left me everything never even knew my name. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button real quick. Tomorrow's story is going to absolutely shock you. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. I was 6 years old when I arrived at Meadowbrook Girls' Home, clutching a stuffed rabbit that was missing one ear and wearing clothes that smelled like cigarette smoke. My mother had dropped me off on a Tuesday morning, promising she'd be back once she got clean. That was in 2008. She never came back. Meadowbrook wasn't the worst place a kid could end up. The building was old, but clean, with creaky wooden floors and windows that rattled when the wind blew. We slept in rooms with 4 beds each, ate meals together in a cafeteria that always smelled like industrial cleaner, and followed a schedule that never changed. Wake up at 7, breakfast at 7:30, school during the week, chores on weekends, lights out at 9. But the part that hurt the most was watching the other girls leave. Sarah was the first one I really remember. She was 8 years old, with blonde braids and a gap-toothed smile. A couple came to visit on a Saturday afternoon, and by Monday, Sarah was packing her things into a donated suitcase, crying happy tears. She promised to write, but I never heard from her again. Then there was Maya, who got adopted by a family with 3 boys who wanted a daughter, and Jessica, who went to live with her grandmother in Florida, and Brittany, who found a home with a young couple who couldn't have children of their own. One by one, girls arrived and girls left. But I stayed. The social workers tried to explain it to me in gentle voices. "You're a wonderful girl, Claire," they'd say. "The right family just hasn't come along yet." But I knew the truth. I was too old, too quiet, too unremarkable. The couples who visited always gravitated toward the younger girls, the ones who were bubbly and outgoing, who hadn't yet learned to protect themselves by building walls. By the time I turned 12, I'd stopped hoping. I'd watched 17 girls get adopted while I remained, and I'd learned that hope was just another word for disappointment, waiting to happen. I threw myself into school instead. If I couldn't have a family, I could at least have good grades. I spent hours in the small library at Meadowbrook, reading everything I could find. Mrs. Palmer, the home's director, noticed and started bringing me books from the public library. She never said much, just left them on my bed with a small smile. "Education is something nobody can take from you," she told me once. "Whatever happens in your life, knowledge is yours to keep." I held on to those words like a lifeline. The years blurred together. More girls came and went. I celebrated birthdays with sheet cake and awkward singing from staff members who meant well but couldn't hide their pity. I attended school, did my chores, and counted down the days until I'd age out of the system. By 17, I'd watched 43 girls get adopted. 43? I kept count in a notebook I hid under my mattress, not because I was bitter, or maybe I was, but because I needed to document that I'd witnessed all these happy endings, even if I wasn't getting my own. Then everything changed on a cold November afternoon when Mrs. Palmer called me into her office. I assumed I was in trouble. Maybe I'd forgotten to finish my cleaning assignment or stayed up too late reading. But when I walked in, there was a man I'd never seen before sitting across from her desk. He was probably in his 50s, wearing a suit that looked expensive, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "Claire, this is Mr. Thomas Barrett," Mrs. Palmer said. "He's an attorney, and he needs to speak with you about something important." My stomach dropped. The only time lawyers showed up was when something terrible had happened. Had my mother died? Was I in some kind of legal trouble I didn't know about? Mr. Barrett must have seen the panic on my face because he smiled gently. "You're not in any trouble, Claire. Actually, I'm here with some rather surprising news. Do you know a woman named Dorothy Mitchell?" I shook my head. The name meant nothing to me. "Mrs. Mitchell was a widow who lived about 30 miles from here on a cattle ranch," he continued. "She passed away 3 weeks ago at the age of 87, and she left something for you in her will." The words didn't make sense. How could a stranger leave me anything? I'd never been 30 miles from Meadowbrook except for school field trips. "I don't understand," I said quietly. "I've never met anyone named Dorothy Mitchell." "That's what makes this so interesting," Mr. Barrett said, pulling a folder from his briefcase. "Mrs. Mitchell never met you either, but she knew about you." He explained that Dorothy Mitchell had been a regular donor to Meadowbrook for over 20 years. She'd never visited, never adopted, but every month she sent a check to help support the home. 5 years ago, she'd asked Mrs. Palmer about the girls who'd been there the longest, the ones who seemed to slip through the cracks of the adoption system. Mrs. Palmer had mentioned me. "Dorothy was very specific in her questions," Mr. Barrett said. "She wanted to know about your character, your interests, your dreams. Mrs. Palmer spoke very highly of you." I glanced at Mrs. Palmer, who had tears in her eyes. She'd never told me about these conversations. "Dorothy had no children of her own," Mr. Barrett continued. "Her husband died 15 years ago, and she'd been running their ranch alone with the help of a few workers. She was a very private woman, but she had a soft spot for girls who'd been overlooked. She wanted to do something meaningful with her estate." He slid a document across the desk toward me. "Claire, Dorothy Mitchell has left you her ranch, all 400 acres of it, including the house, barn, livestock, and equipment. There's also a trust fund set up for your education and living expenses, $50,000 to help you get started." The room tilted. 400 acres. $50,000. It was impossible. People like me didn't inherit ranches from strangers. We aged out of foster care with garbage bags full of donated clothes and maybe $100 if we were lucky. "This has to be a mistake," I whispered. "It's not a mistake," Mr. Barrett said firmly. "Dorothy was very clear about her wishes. She wanted you to have a real chance at life, Claire. She wanted you to have a home." I couldn't speak. All I could do was stare at the legal documents in front of me, seeing my name typed in official font next to phrases like beneficiary and property transfer. "There's one condition," Mr. Barrett added. "You have to actually go to the ranch and spend at least 6 months there before you can make any decisions about selling or changing things. Dorothy wanted you to experience ranch life, to understand what she's giving you before you decide what to do with it." Mrs. Palmer reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. "This is real, Claire. This is your chance." That night, I lay in my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to process what had happened. A woman I'd never met had been watching over me from a distance, had cared enough to leave me everything she owned. It felt like something from a book, not something that happened to girls like me. But the legal documents were real. The lawyer was real. And in 6 months, when I turned 18 and aged out of Meadowbrook, I wouldn't be homeless and desperate. I'd have a ranch waiting for me. For the first time in years, I let myself hope. The next few months were a blur of planning and preparation. Mr. Barrett handled all the legal details, ensuring the property transfer would be smooth. Mrs. Palmer helped me research ranching, checking out books from the library about cattle care, land management, and rural living. The other girls at Meadowbrook were excited for me, though I could see some of them wondering why I'd gotten so lucky when they were still waiting for their own miracles. I graduated from high school in May, standing on a stage in a borrowed dress to receive my diploma. Mrs. Palmer was in the audience, cheering louder than anyone. That night, she gave me a leather journal. "Write about your journey," she said. "Years from now, you'll want to remember how brave you were." 2 weeks after my 18th birthday, Mr. Barrett drove me to the ranch. We traveled down highways that turned into back roads, that turned into a gravel driveway marked by a weathered wooden sign, "Mitchell Ranch, established 1953." The property was breathtaking. Rolling hills stretched toward distant mountains, and cattle grazed peacefully in fenced pastures. The main house was a single-story ranch-style building with a wide front porch and windows that reflected the afternoon sun. Behind it stood a massive red barn, several equipment sheds, and a smaller cottage that Mr. Barrett explained had been used for ranch hands. "Dorothy kept a small operation," he said as we parked in front of the house. "About 60 head of cattle, a few horses, and some chickens. She had 2 part-time workers who've been maintaining things since she got sick, but they're waiting to meet you before deciding if they'll stay on." My legs felt shaky as I stepped out of the car. This was mine, all of it. The land, the animals, the buildings. It was overwhelming and terrifying and wonderful all at once. The house was unlocked. Inside, everything was neat but dated, with furniture from decades past and walls covered in faded wallpaper. The kitchen had yellow linoleum floors and appliances that probably hadn't been updated since the 1980s. But it was clean and spacious, with big windows that let in natural light. "Dorothy's personal belongings are still here," Mr. Barrett said. "She wanted you to go through everything. Keep what you want. Donate the rest. There's no rush." He handed me a set of keys and a thick folder containing property documents, contact information for the ranch hands, and instructions Dorothy had left about the daily operations. "There's one more thing," he said, pulling an envelope from his briefcase. "Dorothy left you a letter. She wanted you to read it after you'd seen the ranch. What comes next is something I never saw coming. Stick with me and make sure you subscribe." After Mr. Barrett left, I sat on the porch steps, holding the envelope in my trembling hands. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In the distance, I could hear cattle lowing and birds singing. It was so quiet compared to the constant noise of Meadowbrook. I opened the envelope carefully, pulling out several pages of handwritten text. Dorothy's handwriting was shaky but legible, the letters carefully formed by someone who'd taken their time. "Dear Claire," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're sitting on my porch wondering why a crazy old woman left everything to a girl she never met. Let me explain. My husband Richard and I tried for years to have children. We went through treatments, suffered miscarriages, and eventually accepted that it wasn't going to happen for us. We talked about adoption, but Richard was old-fashioned. He worried about loving someone else's child as much as his own. I should have pushed harder, should have insisted. That's my biggest regret. After Richard died, I was alone on this ranch for the first time in 40 years. The silence was deafening. I started volunteering at different charities, trying to fill the emptiness. That's how I found Meadowbrook. I never visited because I was a coward, Claire. I was afraid that if I met the girls, I'd want to bring one home, and I was too old and too set in my ways to be a good mother. But I couldn't stop thinking about all those children waiting for someone to choose them. Mrs. Palmer told me about you 5 years ago. She said you were smart and kind and resilient, but the couples always passed you over for younger girls. She said you'd stopped hoping for adoption and were just counting the days until you aged out. That broke my heart because I saw myself in you, someone who'd stopped expecting good things to happen. I couldn't adopt you, Claire. I was already 82 years old with failing health, but I could do something else. I could make sure you had a real start in life, not just a garbage bag of belongings and good luck wishes. This ranch has been my sanctuary, my purpose, my home. It sustained me through grief and loneliness and hard years. I wanted to do the same for you. I want you to have land under your feet and a roof over your head that nobody can take away. I want you to know what it feels like to belong somewhere absolutely and completely. You don't have to keep the ranch if ranching isn't your calling. Sell it and use the money for college or travel or whatever dreams you have. But spend 6 months here first. Give this place a chance to teach you what it taught me. That healing happens slowly, that hard work can save you, and that being alone isn't the same as being lonely. I wish I could have met you, Claire. I wish I could have known the woman you'll become. But I believe in you, even from beyond the grave. You survived a childhood that would have broken many people. You kept going when you had every reason to give up. That strength will serve you well out here. Welcome home, dear girl. Make this land yours. Make it sing. And know that somewhere an old woman who never got to be a mother is watching over you with more pride than you can imagine. With all my love, Dorothy. I sat on those porch steps and cried harder than I'd cried since the day my mother left me at Meadowbrook. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of overwhelming emotion that someone had cared enough to do this for me. Dorothy Mitchell had given me more than property. She'd given me validation, proof that I mattered, that I was worth investing in. She'd seen value in a girl nobody else had wanted, and she'd bet her entire legacy on me. I spent that first night in Dorothy's house, my house, exploring every room. Her bedroom still had clothes in the closet and books on the nightstand. The spare room was set up as an office with filing cabinets full of ranch records. The bathroom had medicine bottles with her name on them. It felt like Dorothy might walk through the door at any moment. In the living room, I found photo albums documenting decades of ranch life. Pictures of Dorothy and Richard when they were young, working the land together. Photos of cattle drives and harvest seasons, images of the ranch through different eras, showing how it had changed and grown. There were also pictures of Dorothy in her later years, working alone but looking content. One photo showed her on horseback, her silver hair pulled back in a braid, her weathered face breaking into a genuine smile. She looked strong and capable and at peace. I wanted to be like that. I wanted to find that kind of contentment in my life. The next morning, I met the ranch hands Dorothy had employed. Jack was in his 60s, a weathered man with kind eyes who'd worked for Dorothy for 20 years. His daughter Emma was in her early 30s, tough and capable, with a no-nonsense attitude that reminded me of Mrs. Palmer. "Dorothy talked about you," Jack said as we stood in the barn. "She was real excited about you coming here, wanted everything to be perfect. We've been keeping things running, but we need to know if you want us to stay or if you're planning to sell." I looked around the barn at the equipment and supplies, at the life Dorothy had built. "I want to stay," I said. "I want to learn how to run this place, but I don't know anything about ranching. I'm going to need a lot of help." Jack smiled. "Dorothy figured as much. She left instructions for us to teach you everything, paid in advance for 6 months of our wages. She wanted to make sure you had support while you figured things out." Emma stepped forward. "It's not going to be easy. Ranch work is hard, dirty, and never-ending. You'll be up before dawn, working until dark, and dealing with problems you never imagined. Animals get sick, fences break, equipment fails. Weather can destroy months of work in a single afternoon. This life isn't romantic or easy." "I know," I said, though I didn't really know, not yet. "But I'm not afraid of hard work, and I don't have anywhere else to be." Emma nodded approvingly. "All right then, let's get you started." The first few weeks were brutal. I learned to feed cattle, muck stalls, mend fences, and operate equipment I'd never seen before. My hands blistered, my muscles ached, and I fell into bed exhausted every single night. But I also felt more alive than I ever had. There was something deeply satisfying about physical work, about seeing the direct results of my effort. When I fixed a section of fence, it stayed fixed. When I fed the animals, they were no longer hungry. The work was honest and straightforward in a way nothing else in my life had been. Jack was patient, teaching me the basics of cattle care and land management. Emma was tougher, pushing me to do things I didn't think I could do. Together, they transformed me from a clueless city girl into someone who could actually function on a ranch. I made countless mistakes. I let cattle escape through a gate I forgot to latch. I broke a fence post trying to hammer it in wrong. I nearly got kicked by a horse I approached too carelessly. But Jack and Emma never made me feel stupid. They just showed me the right way and made me practice until I got it. Dorothy made mistakes too when she first started, Jack told me after I'd accidentally scattered chicken feed all over myself. She and Richard learned together, and even after 40 years, she was still figuring things out. Ranching isn't something you master. It's something you keep learning. As summer turned to fall, I started to find my rhythm. The work became less overwhelming and more routine. I could look at the cattle and tell if something was wrong. I could check fences and spot problems before they became disasters. I learned to read the weather, to plan ahead, to think like a rancher. The ranch also started to feel like home. I decorated the house slowly, keeping some of Dorothy's things, but adding my own touches. I painted the kitchen a soft blue. I hung new curtains. I filled the bookshelves with volumes I ordered online, creating the library I'd always wanted. The property itself became my sanctuary. I'd take walks in the evening, watching the sun set over the hills, feeling the wind on my face. The silence that had seemed so strange at first became comforting. Out here, I could breathe. I could think. I could just be. One October afternoon, I was working in the barn when a car pulled up. An elderly woman got out, moving slowly with the aid of a cane. Emma came out of the house to greet her, and they spoke for a moment before Emma called me over. "Claire, this is Helen Foster," Emma said. "She was Dorothy's best friend." Helen looked at me with eyes that were both sad and curious. "So you're the girl Dorothy was always talking about. She was so proud of you, you know, so hopeful about what you'd do with this place." "I wish I could have met her," I said, and I meant it. I wish I could have thanked her. "She didn't want thanks," Helen said. "She wanted you to have a chance she never got. Dorothy spent her whole life wishing for a daughter, and in the end, she found a way to be a mother anyway. Not in the traditional sense, but in the way that mattered, giving someone a foundation to build a life on." Helen visited regularly after that, sharing stories about Dorothy and Richard, helping me understand the woman who'd changed my life. She taught me Dorothy's recipes, showed me photo albums I hadn't found, and filled in the history of the ranch. "Dorothy would watch you if she was here," Helen said during one visit. "Not in a creepy way, but just to see you succeed. That's all she ever wanted." Winter came, and with it, new challenges. Frozen water pipes, cattle that needed extra feed, equipment that wouldn't start in the cold. But I faced each problem with Jack and Emma's help, learning that ranch work didn't stop for weather or holidays or exhaustion. On Christmas Eve, Jack invited me to his family's dinner. I almost declined, uncomfortable with the idea of intruding on their celebration. But Emma wouldn't take no for an answer. "Your family now," she said simply. "Dorothy would want you there." Sitting around Jack's table with 3 generations of his family, passing dishes and laughing at stories, I felt something I hadn't felt since before my mother left me at Meadowbrook. I felt like I belonged. By the time my 6-month deadline arrived, I'd made my decision. I wasn't selling the ranch. This was home now, the place where I was building a life I could be proud of. I loved the work, the land, the rhythm of seasons and cycles. I loved knowing that every improvement I made would last, that I was building something permanent. I called Mr. Barrett and made it official. The ranch was mine, completely and forever. Dorothy would be thrilled, he said. She hoped this would happen, but she wanted you to choose it freely. I also made another decision. I contacted Mrs. Palmer at Meadowbrook and established a scholarship fund using part of my trust money. Every year, it would provide support for girls aging out of the foster system, particularly those who'd been overlooked and passed over, like I had been. "This is wonderful, Claire," Mrs. Palmer said, crying on the phone. "You're honoring Dorothy's legacy beautifully." But I wasn't just honoring Dorothy. I was honoring every girl who'd ever felt invisible, who'd watched others get chosen while they remained behind. I was trying to be for someone else what Dorothy had been for me, a stranger who cared enough to make a difference. As my first year on the ranch came to a close, I stood on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from a little girl abandoned at Meadowbrook to a woman who owned 400 acres and knew how to work the land. I thought about the 43 girls who'd been adopted while I stayed behind. I'd resented them once, had felt jealous of their happy endings. But now I understood that they got their miracles, and I got mine. It just took longer to arrive. Dorothy had given me more than property or money. She'd given me proof that I mattered, that someone believed in me enough to invest in my future. She'd given me a home, a purpose, and a chance to become someone I was proud of. And every day, as I worked this land she loved, I tried to live in a way that would make her proud. I tried to be brave and resilient and kind. I tried to honor her memory by building a life that mattered. The ranch taught me what Dorothy promised it would, that healing happens slowly, that hard work can save you, and that being alone isn't the same as being lonely. I wasn't lonely anymore. I was home. Thank you so much for listening to Claire's story. If it touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button. We share stories about resilience, hope, and finding your place in the world, and your support means everything. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had someone believe in you when you'd stopped believing in yourself? Or maybe you've been the person who changed someone else's life. Share your stories with our community, and don't forget to check out the 2 videos on your screen right now for more incredible journeys. Until next time, remember that your story isn't over yet. The best chapters might still be waiting to be written.